This is Left Brain, Right Brain. This is Dalton.
This is Terry, and if you can't tell who's who, you ain't paying attention.
And we just read some of the news. And here's an Oklahoma man accused of killing fisherman out of fear of being eaten by Bigfoot, authorities say. And I have to say, I agree with them. I mean, if a man threatens to summon Bigfoot to kill you, you have to do it.
Was this man on bath salts?
Wait, are you trying
Be
to
honest
say...
with me.
Are you trying to say Bigfoot doesn't exist, Terry?
In every conceivable way. I don't know how people still believe Bigfoot exists in a time and a place where we have indisputable evidence against the concept. If Bigfoot was real, there would be some form of biological evidence. Bodies, bones, anything. I'm not going to go on a tirade. Next.
Wow, Terry. I guess I gotta shift the focus episode to proving Bigfoot to you.
Oh, God, no.
Well, first of all, we already got this evidence of a man threatening to summon Bigfoot. So we already got that, so he knows Bigfoot himself. But let's start with the famous evidence. You see this, Terry?
We're going to that. Yes, this famous image. So, for some context, I know that there are people who are going to bring this up in the comment section, so I'm going to just touch on it. Yes, the guy who did the special effects for Planet of the Apes was asked if he could do this, and he said, I'm good, but I'm not that good. But at the same time, the guy who filmed, one of the guys who supposedly was a part of the crew said that it was a fake. But at the same time, the guy who filmed it to this day still says it's real. I want to just ask this question of people, and I genuinely want to ask this question. If this animal is real, and they were able to get film of it, so it means that it's not camera shy, why has there ever only been one film of Bigfoot that looks exactly like this?
Well, listen,
if it's a species, there should be more individuals.
But you see, there have been other footage. He just said, you foolish debunkers try to explain it away with an ape suit.
Well, if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck. It ain't a platypus.
Well, you know what? It walks like a Bigfoot and sounds like a Bigfoot. It's a Bigfoot.
Okay, again, I'm going to bring up this question. Bigfoot, as we understand him, came about sometime in the late 18th century. Described as an ape man. But in the traditional Native American description of him, he's a wild man. He's not a giant gorilla-looking motherfucker. He's a genuine wild person of the forest. He's more like a fae or a mystical creature, less some lost ape man that wanders the forest.
Now, of course, let's just debunk some of the evidence the people have against this footage. So they claim that the footprints left by this Sasquatch would make no sense with being tall, because the footprints, according to them, would mean they're all like 6 feet tall, while according to them, it's like the man who shot this footage is like 8 or 10 feet tall.
Also, the gait is very odd. If you look at how the video walks, you can kind of see that it's someone very clunkily walking. So I'm guessing they had on really heavy footprint shoes, really deeper tracks.
Well, I can explain it why.
Let's see.
The government's requesting information.
Another quick one. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, the government.
What does the government gain from thinking? So this is all conspiracy theorists out there who say the government's trying to hide Bigfoot. Why? Why is this important? Why hide Bigfoot?
We see that be actually the last thing I'll answer out of all of this, and then I'll answer you why the government trying to suppress Bigfoot.
Alright.
So in 2008, police officer Matt Witten and car salesman Rick Dyer discovered Bigfoot and had its remains in their freezer. Definitive evidence of Bigfoot. I mean, who's more trustworthy than
and where are the remains now? I was going to leave out that part. I'm just going to ask the question, where are the remains now? And if they have them, why don't they just show them to the public?
Well, this was in 2008, and the authorities claim that it was just they forced these men to say that it was a rubber suit filled with possum roadkill and slaughterhouse leftovers, but I know the truth.
Okay. There's another question I have. If you have a corpse, why don't you get a DNA tested? This is always that kind of bugs me about Bigfoot, believers. If Bigfoot is real, it is an animal that sheds hair, skin cells. It's got to take a dump somewhere. It leaves behind genetic evidence. This is why Loch Ness has been disproven because, you can test for the genetic presence of animals in their environment. This is actually something we do quite often to study animals like bees. So we'll take DNA from flowers and we'll mark it. And if we find it's bee DNA, then we can identify the bee DNA.
They actually did do testing on this. 4 scientists, with 2 of them being Russian, analyzed the corpse and actually looked at some of the bones, and they said they came from a deer, but clearly Bigfoot just has deer bone.
That sounds about right.
How do you think he runs fast?
Here's the thing about it. If you're going to fake Bigfoot, fake it with something that's close in close proximity, like the bones of a chimpanzee. Even though any primatologist, yes, that's actually what they're called, will be able to identify it as a chimpanzee. Bigfoot has no consistent description in all of the recordings because its fur color, its height, its build keeps changing. And before some smartass in the comments writes it down, yes, I understand that there can be genetic variation within species. Counterpoint, there is a limit to that. Why are some Bigfoots in the 50s described as having red fur? Well, in the 70s, it's black fur. And then other times in the 2000s, it's a brownish blonde. This animal has no consistency.
Terry, I think these humans are made up. Like, some of them are white, some are black. Like, they just no consistency. That's how you sound right now. You trying to deny Bigfoot?
No, you know what? There is consistency. Because there are black people consistently described as black people. There are white people consistently described as white people. Bigfoot's description changes with the decades. He's described as being anything from a gentle giant to a ferocious beast.
Now, here's the government killing a man trying to prove Bigfoot. Now, according to the mainstream narrative, the man was wearing a bushy, military-style camouflage suit in an apparent attempt to impersonate the mythical creature before being hit by two cars, police said on Thursday.
That seems far more likely than him being assassinated by the government, because if they really wanted him dead, they would probably just, shoot him, arrest him, say he was insane.
The truth?
Why would you kill
Bigfoot? And they killed him and put him inside this rubber suit in order to discredit him.
I'm pretty sure if we did a post-mortem autopsy, we would find that he was in the suit when he died. You can actually prove stuff like that.
I also like how he got hit by two cars, like the first one driven by a 15-year-old. Apparently 50-year-olds are allowed to drive in Montana with a learner's permit, and not by a 17-year-old, which is more likely. There are two teenage drivers who hit and killed somebody because of bad drivers, or the government killed the man.
I think the first option is literally the most reasonable one.
What, you think there's a drunk weirdo in Montana posing as Bigfoot?
Yes, I think that this is completely reasonable.
You believe anything.
I believe stuff that makes sense. I actually have a degree in biology. I have to be skeptical. I'm more willing to believe that there are currently giant sea creatures than there are Bigfoot. And even then, I call bullshit on it. Mostly.
Well, you know what? Manager Dennis Peterson, who did not recall selling one to Tenley, said that shaggy $100 suits are often bought by boys who use them in paintball games. Tell me, Terry, if he bought the suit, why is there no evidence from the suit seller himself?
It's called Amazon.
No, he has perfect recall.
Memory is fallible.
Actually, he said OT8.
Okay, perfect example. Dalton, how many bites did it take you to finish your breakfast 2 weeks ago?
Exactly 53.
And how could I prove this?
Well, maybe Bigfoot could tell
because
you. Because he was there with me.
If he's there with you, I have several questions. Mainly questions like, how the fuck have we never found you? What are you eating? What's your role in the ecology? Why the hell, if you're intelligent enough to use tools, as people say, have you never tried contact?
No, I'm a human, but I'm with Bigfoot.
Ah, I see.
But of course, all that he said still applies to me.
Okay, there's a lot of problems I have with Bigfoot. I can understand people in, let's say, Borneo believing in a ape-man because orangutans, they sometimes walk on their hind legs. It's weird, but it happens. And, what I'm going to say is the most common reason we mistake things for Bigfoot is bears. Black bears walk on their back legs at times when they're trying to browse, and grizzly bears are also known to do so when they're looking for food. And if you're in the early morning and late afternoon and you see a humanoid figure in the twilight hours, I could see the inconsistencies there. I could see why a short black Bigfoot called the skunk ape or the billy boon has been described, because that's just a black bear. And I can describe why there's a giant, muscular, brown-furred bear, like the grizzly bear, is mistaken for the other kind of Bigfoot. This is one of my main issues with a lot of descriptions of Bigfoot, is that it's so inconsistent. It's obvious it's multiple species. There's 6 or 7 different species of Bigfoot, which I have so many questions about.
I get it. personal witness evidence. You just can't trust your own eyes. But you know what you can trust? The law. And there have been multiple legal cases involving Bigfoot. Now, we're just going to get in the background of this one with Todd Standing. Now, he used to be a skeptic, but in his own documentary, Discovering Bigfoot, what he said was a skeptic. Now, Todd made a 30-minute documentary, The Origins of Savankic, The Legend Becomes Reality, in 2007, and you could see it for a mere $5.
If I also believed Animal Planet, there are mermaids, megalodons, and dragons.
Well, wait. Jerry, don't give me more things to prove to you.
If you can somehow prove to me any of this stuff is real, I will literally pay you $1 million.
Well, better open up that bank account because I'm about to prove it to you right now with Todd Standing. Now, he presented a petition with 500 signatures to MP Mike Lake, asking for Bigfoot to be protected as an endangered species under the Species at Risk Act. Lake submitted it as a service to constituents without making any judgment call, although he himself did not believe in Bigfoot. You heard that right, Terry. The Parliament of Canada itself voted whether or not to make Bigfoot an endangered species.
Oh, sort of like how the Senate of Kansas put in that it's illegal to whale in Kansas. Just because a governmental body puts a bill into effect does not mean that one, it's intelligent, and two, it actually is enforced. I mean, technically speaking, if you're a woman, unmarried, and trying to go skydiving on a Sunday, you're supposed to be arrested. And if we go to the state of Arizona, it's still legal to kill Native Americans in a grouping above 5 people, as that is considered a war party. But we don't do that because that's bullshit, and that's laws that were made up in the turn of the century.
Let's get into the legal aspect. Now, Todd Standing sued the British Columbian government in 2018, 2017. He filed a civil lawsuit in British Columbia Supreme Court, claimed the provincial government was a dereliction of duty for not recognizing the evidence that he and others gathered. And actually, I think I have video of him announcing his lawsuit.
Todd Standing has dedicated most of his life to proving that Bigfoot is real. And now he says he has evidence and wants to go to court to present it.
I'm going to go to court to prove 2 things with PhDs, police officers, fingerprint experts, forensic experts, immense amounts of profound information. All these professional experts are going to testify Sasquatch is real.
Okay, what do these people have PhDs in? I have to ask this question.
Well, okay, so I don't know specifically.
Because if it's cryptozoology.
But so I watched part of his documentary, like 10 minutes of it, and I saw the PhDs next to their names, so he got all these PhDs, forensic scientists, all these experts that you cannot refute.
I mean, I can't refute that they have a PhD if they can prove it. I can just refute if they're experts. For example, if you have a PhD in psychology, you don't have the credentials to be giving information about a existence or non-existence of a species.
Wow, Terry. Attacking the messenger.
No, it's called that the scientific community has a separation of multiple levels of, I would say not government, but basically multiple separations of career paths or people who are specialists for a reason. A toxicologist is not going to be the guy you want to talk to about civil engineering, or vice versa. You don't want to talk to an astrophysicist about medicine. They usually don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Sadly, Standing lost his lawsuit.
Oh, wow. What a tragedy.
It was dismissed. Well, it's not lost, it was just dismissed by Supreme Court Justice Kenneth Ball because he found no reasonable cause for the lawsuit and said the court had no power to compel the province to conduct scientific investigations of its flora and fauna.
Good.
Now, before I get into a documentary, I'm going to show you another lawsuit involving Bigfoot. This one filed in California. Now, a woman in South California sued the state in 2018 to prove that she saw Bigfoot. According to her, she looked like a Neanderthal man with a lot of hair and about 800 pounds.
800 pounds. Neanderthal is said to be about 5'6" on average.
Well,
this means that this guy was morbid. It was like, say what?
Well, she said it was like one.
Like one. Okay. Still, though, that is ridiculously heavy. That's like the weight of a lowland gorilla. But okay.
Now you may ask, why did I bring this up? Like, she's just some random woman in California. What does she have behind backing her up on this? Well, she has Todd Standing behind her. And he said he intends on bringing forward the overwhelming evidence to prove that Sasquatch is indeed a species and that it exists in the wild in California.
I don't think I need to explain why that's bullshit, but I'm going to give you a counterexample. Let me just get it real quick. Okay, so here's an image for you. This creature is supposed to be an extinct species of amphibian. Notice how real it looks. Notice how much this thing seems to be alive, and that it's an amazing find for nature.
Yep.
I should also point out this is a statue that was made by a Japanese sculptor. He took the picture and people thought it was real. There you go.
You know what, Terry? All art is based off of life.
Well, yes, it's based on life. It's based on fossils. And it's also technically outdated. Even the artist himself said that recent finds completely changed the look of the creature. But for some reason, people still think this is real.
Now, about that lawsuit in California, you wanna know what happened to it? It got sadly, it was at the request of potential Claudia, actually the one who filed it, because she plans on refiling the lawsuit.
Of course.
And even though you are just going to deny his credentials, his experience, his evidence, I'm pretty sure the next thing you will believe wholeheartedly. First the leprechaun, and now this. Now, in Mobile, Alabama, the police department has said they cannot confirm this, but they cannot neither disprove it.
Okay. A few questions to ask. One, why would it happen in the water?
Hey,
Almost all large apes hate water,
listen, hear me out.
instinctually.
He doesn't have a shower and he needs to get clean.
Humans are actually kind of weird because we kind of are okay with water. We still have a semi-instinctual fear of it. I just kind of zoomed in on this, and I think I can see the seam where the head meets the shoulders.
Well, listen, it's just
Now, don't quote me on that, but
listen, Bigfoot just having balding problems. Bigfoot
around
also
the neck,
it's just male pattern baldness.
on the animal covered in fur. I'm a fuzzy dude, and my hairline's receded a little over time, but even I'm just like, that's not how that works.
Now the police have debunked his claim that they of it, but according to Kenny himself, made it the claim. Update: Mobile Police Sheriff's Office just validated the photos, and the finding Bigfoot team has been deployed to Big Creek Lake in Wilmer, Alabama.
And okay, here's another thing. If this Bigfoot was around the muddy banks of the river, he would have left DNA evidence. He would have left deep footprints. He would have left skin cells. He would have been. It wouldn't have been, nothing. Like, if this was real, we would have seen the greatest supply of evidence for Bigfoot ever. You can usually find a lot of evidence of animals when they're at watering holes. And, well, simply put, if there's a drought going on or anything like that, they do have to come back to it and you can ambush them.
You know, Terry, you always talk about the genetic evidence, DNA. Well, here is some. Actually, here's a bunch of it. So, in 1951, Eric Shipton returned from Mount Everest with proof of the Yeti, which is just the, their version of the Bigfoot. And he brought back cold fingers and toes. And, I can't really find the date, but they did studies on it in 2012. And they received a total of 57 hair samples. Now, according to them, visual microscopic and infrared surveillance examination showed they were just plant materials and glass fiber, and other remaining samples, they're just wolf
dogs, cats. Yeah, I've seen a lot of these quote unquote Yeti relics from the Himalayas, even though they're usually quite dubious. For example, the hand of a Yeti, which turns out to be the hand of a dead person, or the skull cap of a Yeti, which turned out to be the top of an ox's skull. Like, it's really common to fake this stuff because the Yeti, or Yeren if you're Chinese, is supposed to be this, again, mythical creature. It's sort of like the Xiaobei, or God knows what else.
I get it, Terry. And I do agree with you, because the Yeti is made up, unlike Bigfoot, because I can prove to you that there is indeed Bigfoot hair that is verified by the FBI. Now, this 93-year-old, okay, so he got the FBI to test hair and tissue samples that he might believe help his case.
Okay, here's a question. And this is going back to how you were saying that the government is trying to hide the existence of Bigfoot. Why didn't he just get it done by an independent lab? It's not even that hard or expensive nowadays. I can send DNA samples to 23andMe for like $70 and find out my entire heritage. Yet you're telling me that we can't prove Bigfoot by just sending in the DNA to any genetics lab across the country?
Well, of course, That's just because it was before we figured out the government trying to suppress Bigfoot.
Okay. Also, what kind of tissues does he have? One of my, pet peeves about, we have tissue samples of whatever cryptid. Tissue samples are very unreliable depending on what type of tissue we're looking at. For example, skin cells or blood. Some blood cells have nuclei. Other blood cells don't. For example, red blood cells do not have nucleuses, so they don't have DNA to test. White blood cells do, though, but white blood cells also degrade incredibly quickly. And unless kept in the right conditions, you won't be able to get viable DNA to test. So, yeah, if you have human DNA, a human blood sample and it degrades and then you test it, it's going to come off as some unidentifiable hominid because most of the identifying gene pairs we would look for have either decayed or become corrupted.
According to the FBI, in their February 24, 1977 report, the 15 hair samples and tissue were from a deer.
I could believe that. I could definitely believe that deer could be found in California. Giant ape man?
The FBI is just trying to suppress the evidence, but of course, if you don't believe them, like this 93-year-old man, old people are famous for not being cranks, but if you don't believe him, you can believe this man, an experienced Bigfoot hunter named Todd Standing.
An experienced Bigfoot hunter, the equivalent of saying somebody with a profession in laziness.
Now, Standing say that he found a strand of hair from a tree in southeastern British Columbia that had an unusual DNA sequence. He claimed that it could only be from Bigfoot, while a lab test in Ontario said they were from humans. Of course, Standing rejected the findings and went on a search for another lab to test the hairs.
And they also said it was a human dead body.
I didn't find any.
Because, like I said, here's the thing about it. What is more likely? Big monkey man in tree, or just some kids playing around in the tree and leaving some hair there?
I just want you to go on a rant of some sort about why you believe Bigfoot couldn't exist. Because of my final evidence, we'll explain to you both why you're entirely wrong and why the government wants to suppress Bigfoot.
Okay, let's start from the beginning. Bigfoot's sightings only started to really be noted in the late 18th century, so circa from 1850 onwards. If Bigfoot was a thing, we would have noticed it sooner, as people were documenting all sorts of new biodiversity being found throughout the New World during the Age of Discovery. 2. Bigfoot has no accurate description, no consistent description. If Bigfoot was a relatively, genetically diverse species, we would see a certain level of consistency in sightings. For example, if the Bigfoot was red-haired in only one area, then we should only see the genetic recordings, or not genetic recordings, my bad. The eyewitness recordings describe it as having red hair and not brown, black, green, or whatever the hell they think at this time. Also, why is it that we can never get video footage that lasts more than a couple seconds of the creature? Mind you, we do know how big animals react to cameras, and even intelligent animals like chimpanzees. They usually don't care. Or, vice versa, we can just study them. How the hell does Bigfoot know what a trail cam is? How does he know how to avoid it? And why would he avoid it? What does he gain from that? Biologically speaking, it makes no sense. Bigfoot is also commonly quoted from Native American tellings of the Sasquatch, but I think it's a great misrepresentation of the Sasquatch. Again, he's a wild man, a man of the forest. He's not some animal that they're describing. He's a malevolent spirit. So the idea that Bigfoot is, this animal that the natives knew about and just never really got around to showing any white settlers doesn't really make sense to me. Again, this goes back to the whole idea of if Bigfoot's been around, why haven't we gotten more evidence of him? But that's kind of a circular argument. Let's then go to one of the important bits of information I think no one thinks about. What the hell would Bigfoot be in the ecology? What does he do that no other animal does and probably does better? For example, he can't be a large herbivore. That's filled by buffalo and elk. He can't be a carnivore because he would leave evidence, and that role is filled by wolves, mountain lions, and bears. If he's able to use tools like some people describe, why don't we find flint mops or stone tools left in the forest? If he's capable of interacting and even communicating with people, why don't we see Bigfoot civilizations? Even something as simple as a tribal community. Mind you, chimpanzees don't live alone in the forest. They live in troops. They establish territories. They establish control over certain water or food sources. And you're telling me that Bigfoot, which is supposed to be a Homo sapien of some form, doesn't do that? Bullshit. That's almost every single primate, be it an orangutan, chimpanzee, gorilla, gibbon, bonobo, all the same. And then let's go on some other little. The whole we found evidence of Bigfoot, but the genetic evidence is inconclusive. Like I've said before, that's usually due to DNA degradation. Then let's go with the footprints, which that's hard to fake. You could literally buy comically large feet out of the back of magazines for a long time, so people would just make footprints in the woods. Hell, I even did that one time just to mess with people. So Bigfoot is an animal that would have had to have been not noticed for God knows how long. But the question is, how big is their population? You can't just have 1, 2, 10, 100. A species usually hovers in the thousands. And in no time has a hunter accidentally shot one, one's been hit in a car accident, one's died in a wildfire, or anything like that. I know there's been tellings of such events happening, but never any evidence to really cooperate. I could go on and on and on.
Now, your statements, you made a bunch of good points, like how come we cannot find him, how come they are always evasive cameras, why there are only different versions of them, how many are there, and what's their civilization like? Well, I can tell you, Terry, and this actually involves why the government wants to hide them from you. Bigfoot is an alien.
Dun, dun, dun.
That's why the government wants to stop you from
That
seeing
is
him.
the stupidest thing of everything.
Okay, Terry, tell me this. How come the amount of Sasquatch sightings overlap with the UFO sightings?
Because the same people are crazy enough to believe both things. And what might be simply, I saw a bear in the woods and then I saw a plane overhead, gets interpreted as I saw Bigfoot and I saw the UFO come to pick him up.
Well, that's all we got. That has been Left
All
Brain,
right,
Right
this has
Brain.
been Terry.
This is Dalton, and Bigfoot's real. Goodbye.